I'm from Build Change, and I mean, I can echo all of what Mandy has just said. And in addition to that, I think not only is adaptation super important, but housing is super important, and so critical to everybody's lives who's in this room and all over the world. And we've seen some, really important things happening at this COP with the buildings breakthrough and a lot of discussion of built environment. But not as much discussion as we would like to see of housing, and especially not as much discussion as we would like to see of informal housing. And that's really what we're here to talk about today with, policy practitioners, financiers, and practitioners on the ground who are doing this work. So we're really excited, and we're going to hand over to Sheila Patel for some opening remarks. And some of you may know her, a lot of people do know her. Sheila is the co-founder of Spark, which is an affiliate of SDI. She's also one of the co-founders of the Slum Dwellers International Network. And last year at COP, she launched the Roof Over Our Heads campaign, which has done impressive work since then. And so I'm going to give it over to her to give some opening remarks. Thanks, Sheila. Thanks, Sheila.
So as people are coming in, I hope we are not only talking to the converted, because we are a very small group of people who actually are working on a long-term basis with communities that remain invisible, unacknowledged, and completely outside the remit of state, national, and global discussions, both in climate and in development. So when you talk about cities, most of our cities are obsessed with how they can get foreign direct investments, how their posh neighborhoods should look like to attract the quality of life people who come to work there. And we forget that almost 40 to 60% of our cities in the global south remain illegal, informal, and invisible. And they don't appear in discussions. Everybody in the world talks about them as this amorphous billion and a half people who live informally, but there's no segmentation, there's no classification, there's no acknowledgement that our archaic colonial laws have made most of them informal. And it's convenient for our governments and our elites to keep them like that and not work, especially in Asia and Africa. So the process of acknowledging that not only are so many people living in these places, but that the projections of climate refugees, that extreme weather and our inability to fulfill our commitments to manage carbon emissions is going to produce calamities that are going to bring many, many more people into our cities, not only from that particular region, but from neighboring countries. And so most southern cities are going to end up hosting almost 80% of the anticipated billion people who are going to come in the next 10 years. So the question is, when we talk about adaptation, we talk about resilience, we talk about loss and damage, losses and damage, what does this 1/4 of 1/8 or 1/4, whatever, it's billions of people, what's going to happen to them? What's going to happen to the fact that the majority of this population is below 20? And what are we going to do with the reality that their present homes are so vulnerable, designed to deal with being able to collapse them in the face of evictions and demolitions, to becoming resilient to the challenges of heat, wind, and rain that's going to come to them? So the group of organizations here, which we can count just on one or two hands, is a very small number of people who have dedicated their organizational's main investment to be in producing solutions, to producing advocacy, to exponentially expanding their voices in this space, which we are not being very successful, unfortunately. We don't have the kind of filled audience that we see in many other events. But we still believe that our ability to collaborate, our ability to learn from each other, our ability to support each other in whatever we know, we learn, and we understand, can expand the insights and the knowledge not only to bring more people to work with us, but also to get our governments, our mayors' networks and organizations, and the global community to treat these people with the same kind of commitment, respect, and support that we give to the challenges that other groups of vulnerable people face. Because as one of the women in the communities who was here and just left last year, Christine said, she says, everybody who comes into the city is wicked. If you live in the villages, you are vulnerable and you have the right to demand. But when we come into the city, we become bad people. We're spoiling the city and we are living without the right to be there. So I want us to consider how we are going to shine light on these women especially, who are really the managers of these informal neighborhoods, and assist them to transition, to make their homes resilient, to be able to get their cities to treat them as people who are actually the backbone of the city. All of us in the Global South who work, we know our lives are comfortable because we have a huge array of people working informally to support our lives. And we hope that we can produce inclusive development for change. So each one of our organizations is doing interesting things that we hope are complementary and supportive, and that we get our cities, our educational institutions, and all the people who provide formally and informally materials for these women to build their homes, to work together. Because the goal is to produce resilient homes that don't get destroyed in the face of extreme weather as our first goal. And then to explore ways for expanding their right to be in the city, which I think is what we consider as an entitlement. So we look forward for a very exciting discussion. And let's leave this place with a much more solid and ambitious plan, so that when we come to the next COP, we are not mourning in the same way that we are now, that we are not being acknowledged, not enough is being done, and that our outreach is not adequate enough. So thank you very much for coming here today.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for those opening remarks. I'm going to hand over now to our moderator, Nathaniel Matthews, who's the director of the Global Resilience Partnership. We're so glad to have you here with us, Nate, and I'm going to just give the floor over to you to take this session forward.
Thank you very much, Ariana. And I'm thrilled to be here. Such a critical session. And I don't want to say anything because we've got fantastic panelists who will be saying all the important stuff. So if we could start with our first panel. So we've got Churspin, Juan, and McTavish. If they can join us, please. McTavish as well, please. Great, wonderful. We have this one live. That's good. Great, fantastic. So, we'll start out with. Maybe we'll start out with Juan from Build Change.
Okay.
Is that all right?
That works, yeah.
Great.
I'll give it my best.
Okay, fantastic. So it's been a really busy COP, and but we're really excited you can make time for us today. And I'd like to hear a bit about the strategies and solutions that you're implementing on the ground to support vulnerable communities, but then also wrapping it up, maybe bringing in some of your reflections from what you're seeing at COP as well, and the fantastic work of Build Change.
Yeah, well, I'm Juan Caballero. Thanks for having me. I'm an architect from Honduras, and I've been working with Build Change for over 12 years now, I think. Build Change has been around for 20 years, and all we do is exactly that. Work with vulnerable communities or emerging economies and people in those economies towards resilient housing. We've worked a lot in the disaster resilience space. So for a significant portion of the time the organization has been around, we did work in post-disaster settings, reconstructing houses, helping people rebuild after disasters. That involved a lot of new construction. And then as we dived into that, we worked a lot also in adapting existing construction to make those homes better respond to disasters. Over the years, we've realized how important this work is in the face of climate change, since disasters are being, especially weather-related disasters, are being exacerbated by climate change, and how important it is to work closely to the community to be able to get this work done. As Sheila was saying, one of our main focuses is what we call homeowner-driven construction or homeowner-driven reconstruction, where it is the homeowner, usually women in our case. In 20 years, most of our clients are women, even if if there's a title deed, or the ownership of the home is not theirs. Sometimes, although many times it is the woman who generally works with us or whoever we're working with to do this. Lately, maybe I want to talk about one specific project that we did in Honduras recently. We did a demonstration project in a floodplain zone where for centuries, forever, people have adapted to a cycle of seasonal flooding in a river plain in the valley of Sula, where my family originates from, actually. And that flooding has been the reason why the land is so fertile, so that's why people are there. People are not going to leave that place. And as modernity settled in, the construction style changed. And instead of having what for centuries would today be named as temporary housing, which is housing that could be transported or moved because land was everybody's, it wasn't somebody's. Now you have classic, more modern houses that are on the ground and get flooded and suffer greatly because of that. That flooding, because of climate change, is now worse than it had been before. We had a couple of years ago 2 Category 5s, one a week apart from the other, Category 5 hurricanes. And so we've been helping people there consolidate and retrofit their first floor so that it can better withstand also earthquakes, which the valley is also exposed to. Before they used to build out of non-masonry material, so that was not an issue. Now that is an issue because it's masonry. And then add a second story to that home. That second story, it sounds very simple. It's a very simple intervention. It takes some money. It takes a lot of money to do that. It takes effort and technical expertise to know how to do it. So we work closely with the communities to be able to, with whatever they're doing, in this case we're talking about masonry. In Nepal, for instance, we worked on mud and stone walls. So that they can do that better, that they can do it themselves. And add in that second story, we'll protect them from 8 out of 10 of those storms in that second floor. We have also been able to involve other stakeholders and add a solar panel so that when that flood comes, there's autonomy in that second story. A rain catcher tank so that they can also have water. And they can, like that, withstand most of the flooding that happens. And even if they have to leave the house, their valuables are going to be saved. They're not going to have to start over every couple of years. So that's one way. That's one thing we're doing. Scaling up those solutions and making them available to people is important. We have been able to do a demonstration of the project, but there's definitely a need to scale that type of intervention for adaptation. Connecting then adaptation to disasters and also financing, hopefully, as Sheila was saying, we need to connect all of these. What have I been seeing at COP as a final? And I'll just wrap up there. Definitely not enough about housing. Housing is the largest investment of almost everybody, either in rent or in mortgage. That's a big part of everybody's income. In informal communities, it's just as high or even higher. When people finally own their house, even if they don't own their land, that's probably their largest asset. And so that's, to me, the essence of resilience. Your resilience as a family, as a person, as a human being, is going to be closely tied to where you live. And you hear a lot about buildings and building technology and how that technology for emissions and so forth, which is important and great, but we don't hear nearly enough about half of the buildings, at least, on the planet are self-produced housing in an informal way. What is deemed informal is very formal, it's physically real. But not much of what I've been hearing about buildings, which is not a lot of what I've been hearing about in COP, relates to that type of housing, which is at least half of the housing stock in the planet. A big portion of that housing stock is not only legally vulnerable, but also physically vulnerable to climate change, exposed to disasters, puts people at risk. So what I would like to see, just as Sheila was saying, is that part of the conversation growing as COP progresses. Maybe next year it'll be a much clearer part of this discussion, and not just buildings or urban environment in general, but housing and how it touches on the different things that have to do with people.
Thank you so much, and I think it dovetails so well with Sheila's remarks, and I think that recognition of how intertwined resilience is with people's homes is so critical to everything that we'll be discussing over the next little while. I should have also mentioned just at the beginning that we are going to go through the two panels, but then we have a large section of time for questions and answers. So please take notes, keep your questions, and hold them. And we will have this as a discussion as well, which we're excited about because we also want to hear from the expertise in the room. So that's fantastic. Thank you. And yeah, again, I really like that point on resilience in homes, and also ties to Sheila's great work with the Roof Over Our Heads project and many other fantastic projects in that space. McTavish, maybe I can jump to you because I believe you have a video for us. Yeah? And is that okay? That was a video.
So just a bit of an introduction of the video. We did a research in one of the informal settlements in Zambia where we got to understand what do people know about climate change and why should they advocate for it. And we had to compile it in a poem. So most of the work that we do as New York City TV, this is a program by SDI. So we amplify voices of the people living in informal settlements to just ensure that stakeholders, policymakers are able to see what's really transpiring in the community. So here is a poem of the information we got in one of the informal settlements in Zambia. Don't get emotional.
Fantastic. And McTavish, also, just to mention, you are from the SDI, Slum Dwellers International as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I just want to make sure that's clear. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much.
I woke up this morning and you won't believe what happened last night. I could hear cats and dogs barking and meowing. I almost woke up akati sick to start praying and binding, thinking maybe batwingilila kundoshi mumaziva che inekwatu. But when I opened my eyes, to my surprise, it was actually raining cats and dogs and my roof was badly leaking. You know how Malataya Kwatu have more holes than a disco club? And half of my roof was already blown off by the harsh winds of the night. Everyone can relate how it gets to be. Chimpepo, Chapa 0203. My bed was baptized in the unforgiving rains. My sheets were soaked and wet. You should have seen my kitchen. It was floating spoons and plates. Wow. So I guess this mess was not only in my house, but a good perimeter of the entire community was affected. A few infected, tombs erected, and sadly, I hear others saying that our ignorance is ignorantly oppressing us, and I'm like, what do you mean by such? And they say we are being perpetrated by the results of climate change because our doings are just anthropogenic. Iwe boy, inekwatu ni kuma informal settlements. Iyo vocabulary yako usinipangilako sense. So explain to me what you're trying to illustrate na ayo ma sentiments. And they say, we are the actual cause of these effects, but I tell them to hold as I take 1 minute and think. And so I say we are much more of victims than we are perpetrators of the system. Maybe yes, we unknowingly contribute to factors that fracture us, but Tivizibe is a change and all that, because what we think of is how we are going to survive, and that is what is important. It's not like I'm trying to be ignorant, that I do not want to make it all better and contribute to mitigating these effects caused by this change in climate. There is just this different change that I get to see below my gullet. And that is the increase of sound produced by my stomach each time my hunger scores a go. And so I'm disturbed. Okay, what do you expect? Should I focus on going out to plant a tree when the last time I checked, the breakfast I had was just an aroma of tea coming from my neighbor's house? It's not my fault. I'm just that helpless fellow, put in a dilemma to debate between fighting for the climate or fighting for my stomach. Because look, at times I ask myself, should I plant a tree or should I cut one to sell so I can be able to buy myself some tea? Because hey, I think in Ekwatu, tiliko na serious pressure ka climate change happening in our stomachs, and it seems everyone is trying to ignore that, you see. So tell me why I should stand outside my door and advocate for climate justice as a solution when I can just navigate the little strength I have left in finding what to eat so I can get rid of my malnutrition. Because listen, hunger is what is driving us, and we are passengers sitting in the seats of our empty pots, pans and plates, and I don't think I should spend the whole day worrying about floods in my community. Niziba iyo ninchito ya ma councillors, ma WDCs, nabaja ma MP. So imwe, explain to me why I should prioritize this climate agenda when I am seeing death in form of hunger, trying to put my life asunder. You come to me telling me about greenhouse and what things. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be mean, but that to me just doesn't make any sense. If somebody chose to...
Okay, thank you so much. So this... So this was a poem done in Zambia. We actually did it specifically for this session. We did it a week ago. We do this work as young people collectively with the community. So a number of people in the informal settlement have no idea of what climate change is. Based on the research we had, we actually have more videos, which I'll be happy to share with everybody after the session. So people don't know what agreement was signed in Paris. People don't know what the COP is all about. People don't have an idea of what climate change is. Others haven't even heard the word climate change. And then a lot of stakeholders, policymakers, like the government, which I saw the adaptation policy, which was made in our country. And then the people in the community don't even have an idea of what this plan is, how they came up with it, why were they not engaged. Each and every time they have a roundtable meeting and discuss issues which can work in the community without engaging the community and just find out what's really happening. Do they really understand? So I come from this community, which you were watching there, and a number of people have interest to get to know what climate change is, but it's very difficult to just have access to information. So I got myself lucky to be part of the Zambia Homeless and Poor People's Federation. which works with Slum Dwellers International. So there's a project which they are doing that is called Buy a Brick campaign. So women themselves, with their own savings, manage to even have access to land. And with their advocacy work that they do, they engaged the government and other stakeholders so that they can help them come up with proper housing. Because it's very difficult for a woman who just sells tomato to come up with a house. But working with SDI, it has been easy for women to just get to understand how can they have a proper, resilient housing, and how can they ensure that the future is set for their kids and everybody else. So in the federation, they came up with the Youth Federation for sustainability purposes. Right now we have Mama Sheila, who is still a youth, but in the next 50 years, she will grow up. Then we need people who can take over from them. That's why they came up with the Youth Federation, which I'm a member of, and we get to understand and learn how we can just move on with the movement so that in the next 50 years we can still have the movement running and moving. So I think most of the work that we do as youths in the movement, we try to amplify voices of people living in the informal settlements. If the women have proper ideas which they feel works for them, how do we ensure that the government and other stakeholders are able to hear from them? We do documentaries, we do a number of videos to ensure that the world gets to see what's really transpiring on the ground. People in these informal settlements don't want to be involved. They want to be engaged. They want to say what they want, and they want it to be considered. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's such a powerful video, and I was reflecting as you were speaking. And you know, it's wonderful what you're doing. And actually, I was in Kibera 2 months ago with my family with SDI, and just seeing the power of youth leading the movement and the voices and all this fantastic work. And you know, in many ways, you're bringing, you know, the information about what's happening on, you know, the global stage and the concern to people in informal settlements. It's okay that they don't know, and it's wonderful that they, you know, they want to know. But it's disgraceful that all the conversations, you know, that I'm in on cities, they're not talking about informal settlements. I mean, that's not acceptable at this level. And, you know, especially when, you know, 66% of Africa's population on average, you know, 33% in South Asia, you know, this is the majority of the population in these cities, and it's growing. And the fact that conversation after conversation about cities ignores, you know, these voices and the people there, is not acceptable. So it's wonderful, the work you're doing. So thank you again for that. And so next I'd like to jump over to Churspin with Habitat for Humanity, and tell us about the fantastic work you're doing in Malawi.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Also just joining my colleagues. Thank you. Yeah. Also just joining my colleagues. For us, also just to addressing the housing issues, on how housing and climate adaptation can provide solutions and strategies. We are currently piloting the participatory slum upgrading initiative, and this is an initiative that we are doing under Home Equals campaign that Habitat for Humanity Malawi is conducting with Habitat for Humanity International. And in this particular campaign initiative, we are working with communities and residents from the informal settlements to improve the living conditions of the residents. So as we are partnering with these communities, we appreciate that the informal settlements, just like my colleague have mentioned, they are facing a number of challenges. There is inadequate living conditions, or not proper living conditions. They have issues of land security. They don't access it, lack of basic services, and they're really having a number of compound vulnerability that they are facing. But it is beautiful to learn that the people in the informal settlements themselves, they are already working something towards changing the narrative themselves. And us are coming to work with them, and we can lobby with government to see how best government can listen to the people of informal settlements and listen to their ideas and turn them into action. So this is what we're doing in the informal settlements. And together, we're really working, looking at how best we could put the law of housing in climate adaptation. So we're together working into how best we could support them to attain the land security, how best we could work with them to plan and improve their residence, because currently, as we're talking, the models that have been tried is where informal settlements are supposed to be evicted so that the land that they are in has to be planned and developed. But through this initiative, we are able to work with the informal settlements, listen to their ideas so that we can improve the land together. And I am happy that through these initiatives and the lobbying that we have done, the members themselves are able to free spaces so that loads can be formalized. They're able to try to build their houses incrementally and really improve a number of things on their own. So again, we as Habitat, we are also looking at the importance of partnerships, because we are bringing a number of partners on board. Because when we're looking at the basic services for it to improve, there are agencies in the country that has to provide water, that has to provide sanitation, that has to provide electricity and all that. So we are engaging all the partners together so we can work with the communities and improve the living conditions. And we are actually calling for partnerships that are willing to listen to the ideas of the informal settlements and then turn those ideas into actions. And Habitat for Humanity already has a report that is working on the climate, that is talking about the climate adaptation through housing, and provides a number of solutions and interventions that can help improve housing conditions while adapting climate change. So I really invite you to read it so you can also appreciate a number of interventions that are being proposed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. Sounds like a really important report, so we'll definitely be reading that. That's great. I would now like to we've still got a bit of time, and I would like to talk through some of the other questions we had here. So really thinking about the support that we need, to make the incremental housing upgrades possible with communities, and maybe, just weaving that together, how we can incorporate more community engagement and capacity building, from the Global South into these processes. And Juan, maybe I'll turn back to you for the first shot at these.
I'm not sure I can answer that question. We work closely with communities. I don't see a lack of engagement from communities. It's more a lack of opening from I don't know, making them more visible and giving them more space is probably where I think we need to put the effort. We've definitely money is a big part of this. Access to finance and money, no matter how vocal or engaging or important things are, if there's nobody funding, either through subsidies or lending or creative ways of doing that at the levels of income that we're talking here, it's not going to happen, no matter how much engagement. So I think public policy is one big part of it too. In our motto, we do people and policy first, money later, and then afterwards technology. When I describe the Honduras project, I describe mostly things that have to do with technology, the technique of construction, whatever it is. That's actually the easiest part. The toughest one is first the policy. Somebody needs to want to do something about the problem and enable the environment. I think policy gets discussed at this level a lot. community doesn't really have an invitation to discuss policy nearly as much as it should. And then definitely money is usually the larger missing piece.
Are you seeing any policy wins? Are you seeing this discussed more recently?
Yes, I think, my first COP was the one before this one last year. And I don't know if it's just me or did I not go to the right places last year, but I hear more about the built environment on this one than before. I see also kind of a trend, maybe that's a reflection of accepting reality or just trying to do both in parallel. There's more talk about adaptation. And as I was telling to somebody the other day, there's already before climate change, the housing crisis, the housing deficit was very high. With climate change and the problems that come with it, it's just going to get worse. So before we were not nearly where we wanted to be, and now we're just way behind. But I think that conversation is starting to come more into focus now, and I hope it continues.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's my feeling as well, is that we're getting a momentum behind adaptation resilience, and we're still a long way behind, but it's good. And hopefully we're moving in the right direction. McTavish, same question to you. I mean, the funding thing I think is worth repeating because it remains a key obstacle, and it's not huge sums of money to benefit huge amounts of people as well. I mean, I think there is. Yeah, there's a lot of money that's needed, but it benefits so many.
The payout is definitely worth it.
Exactly, especially when thinking about the city, the budgets of cities. It's certainly, the sums should certainly be there. But McTavish, what are you seeing as your sort of key areas of support, and also, I guess, really any other sort of key lessons in terms of knowledge and both technical or other policy wins that you're seeing from your viewpoint?
Okay. I think the first thing that I can talk about is there's need for more engagement with people living in these communities. I've been in a situation where someone looks down on you because of where you're coming from, and they end up deciding what they feel is best. So if there's more engagement and more dialogue, I think we are aiming for a brighter future. Also, when it comes to funding, even the processes of accessing that funding becomes very difficult for people living in the community. These are people who have never been to schools, most of them. Coming up with a proposal and doing this whole process is a bit complicated. So I think there's need of revising and seeing to it that everybody is on board and the process is inclusive. Then also, housing hasn't seen as an urgent situation by a lot of states. But then at the end of the day, it's something that affects our way of life as human beings. So I think there is need for also prioritizing housing, because people who are living in these informal settlements, for example, it's a rainy season in Zambia, and a number of homes will be flooded. People will be sleeping on top of the fridge, and they think it's a normal thing, but in the actual sense, it's not. And it's actually, they think it's a normal thing based on the experiences. They've been having the same situation year in, year out. So there's need for more information. People in the informal settlement want to know what's really happening. They want to be engaged, and they have solutions of what they are facing, because it becomes unrealistic and most of the time it's never taken serious for a person who hasn't experienced flooding to take the situation serious. But from the horse's mouth, it becomes more of a priority. So there's need for engagement. Thank you so much.
Fantastic, thank you. Crispin.
Thank you. I think my colleagues had already mentioned issues of financing challenges. I think we really need to be serious to invest in housing and also work on making sure that the people of the informal settlements are able to access these resources. Because it's not just enough to provide investments, but also to look at how best then do people living in informal settlement access it. And secondly, for me, is to ensure that governments are able to prioritize housing in national strategies or policies. Sometimes when I look at the documents in my country, I do not see housing as an issue coming out clearly. It comes out in form of urban development or in other forms. But I think when we really want to improve in housing, we need to begin to prioritize it even at that policy level so that light investments can be done. And lastly for me is we have to prioritize climate adaptation for the most vulnerable people. After all, they are the ones that are the most affected. So we really need to begin to prioritize how best then do we support them and how best then do we help them adapt and mitigate to the effects of climate change, because they're the ones that are most affecting. Thank you.
Thank you, Crispin. That's great. So maybe we can give this panel a round of applause, please. But please don't go far, because we'll bring you back up when we do questions and answers. Thank you. And if we can bring on our next panel. So we have Golem from BRAC. Golem. Wonderful. Thank you. And we have, we've got Surin from UN Habitat. Thank you. And Anjali from WRI. Wonderful. So thank you all as well for spending some time with us today during what is a very busy COP. And so I'd like to build off some of the discussion around the policy changes, what we're seeing within this space, and also, of course, please bring in reflections from your own organizations, and also what you've heard over the last month that we've been here at COP, no, the last few days that we've been here at COP as well, please. So maybe I'll start, Mohammed, with you, please, and tell us what you're seeing, from your perspective from Morocco as a mayor here, really recognizing the role of informal settlements. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. Let me just, introduce myself. My name is Ghulam Rabbani, and I work.
Ghulam, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. My notes were wrong.
I'm currently heading the Climate Bridge Fund Secretariat at BRAC, and I'm sure that, if not all, most of you know about BRAC is the world's largest, global South-led NGO, and we have 50 years of experiences in at least in a dozen of countries, including Bangladesh. Let me just, talk about, the changes that we need to address the needs of these informal settlements and the climate victims in Bangladesh and other countries. I will talk about three major words, that I strongly feel this has to be elaborated and addressed. My first word is the recognition. And when I say recognition, it actually means, we need to understand the context of the vulnerable population, including the climate migrants and displaced population. This varies from country to country and even from cities to cities, towns to towns. And, in Bangladesh, for example, when the people, experience the loss of livelihoods in the rural areas, they migrate. And when they come in the new destination, the first thing that they face is the housing. They don't have houses to live in. So first thing is the cities and the towns, the administration have to recognize them as a people of this country and these cities, because they are supporting the cities work. My second word is mainstreaming. And the mainstreaming, when I say mainstreaming, it actually elaborates, every government has their own annual development plan. And also, if not all, most of the countries have already developed the national adaptation plan. So you need to really allocate the specific budget in this annual development plan and also this national adaptation plan in their implementation mechanism, so that some of these problems, not only the basic services, it should include the housings, in these countries, in the slums. My last word is land ownership. This is extremely important. And my personal feeling is, in fact, this is based on the observations and learnings from BRAC, over the last, decades and decades, that the people who actually migrate from the rural areas to urban areas, they experience, 100% people experience this land, problems. And most of the cities, these lands are owned by the government organizations. And they don't know. It's total uncertainty how long they will live in the slum. 5 years, 10 years. So this is something is extremely important, especially in Bangladesh. I'm sure, Delhi and in other cities, this land ownership is extremely important. And I give two examples. BRAC has initiated a low-cost housing, climate-resilient housing programs in Bangladesh. They have tested in 6 cities and towns. And the number one challenge that they are facing is the land ownership. Because one of the rule, of the mechanism is they have to have the land, their own land. And even, in addition to BRAC, the government has facing the same problem. Government also introduced this low-cost housing in the country, they are also facing the same problem. And I was in one event, and the project director was saying, my number one challenge is the ownership of the land. So this is something that needs to be addressed in terms of policy changes. I stop here and come back to the next question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gollum. And let me apologize again for beginning at the name. And BRAC's been a long-time partner of GRPs. I hope you won't leave us now because I messed up your name there.
That's why I reintroduced myself.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you. No, that's fantastic. And that point on land ownership is so critical, because if you don't own the land, why would you invest in it, beyond what you need? Because it could be taken away at any point. And that's such a key point. So thank you very much. If I could now go over to Søren from UN Habitat. And if you could tell us a little bit again, what you're seeing from UN Habitat, the work, but also what you see as the really key policy levers that we need to address.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me here. First, want to thank for Build Change, WRI, Habitat for Humanity, the United Cities local government, and Climate Bridge Fund to actually organize this event. I think it's very critical to bring the voices of home and home ownership, as you mentioned, but also the need for shelter and climate adaptation to the global negotiations. And why is this matter so important? I think we are repeating the facts and figures numerous times, but they can't be unheard and they can't be repeated often enough. We've said it before, we have 55% of the world's population living in cities. Of that, 1.1, even more, in informal settlements. We have, thanks to IPCC, stats that we cannot contend. It's 3.3 to 3.6 billion people living in hotspots of vulnerability. So if I look at urban growth trends right now, it's an average of 1.6 urban growth annually. But then if you look at what's the urban growth in informal settlements, it's 9.85%. That means that my default setting for the urban future is informal. So if that is not reflected in the way we have our national adaptation plans, in our nationally determined contributions, if in our climate finance, then we are losing out on the 1.6 and more billion people out there. And we're doing a COP for whom? We're doing it for the ones that are the most vulnerable. If we start with them first, we actually create safe societies. We create ownership. We create societies that are proud to be where they are. If that is in an informal slum, but I can be proud where I am and my conditions safe, and I'm a more resilient person, then I'm also kind of proud to be a citizen of that person. If a government considers me still informal, I'm still getting more rights in there. I'm better heard. I'm allocated in that bigger, broader negotiation. And I think we've done an assessment of like how many NDCs have actually an urban content. And it said 2/3 of the NDCs have an urban content, but actually only 20 in total have like strong urban content in their NDCs. But you have over 55% of the world's population that are urban. So if they're not urban focused, how then are they at all informal focused? How are they actually reflecting them? So if that is not in there, when none of the even as you mentioned, if I have a national policy that should trigger budgetary decision-making, intergovernmental transfers from national to local government, if my outlook for my NDC or my national adaptation plans is not focused on the vulnerabilities on the ground, but I'm defining vulnerability on a national level, then it is not finite. It's not fine enough. It doesn't reflect what local budgeting actually is needed to be allocated to become more resilient. The second thing I want to highlight is the way we plan, design, and maintain our settlements and key infrastructure is how we will define our resilience also in the future. We say that over 60% of the world infrastructure is yet to be built to meet the 2.5 billion more people by 2050. That is a time-sensitive opportunity to do it right now and not ask for retrofitting in hindsight. So if that urban infrastructure gap is right now, and I'm investing, and we invest into resilience into those infrastructure right now, we can actually make that curve and be a just transition for climate, for resilience, for the informal settlements. So last but not least, I know that time is running short. Everyone is also saying like investing into resilience takes too much or it costs too much. And then there has been a study from World Bank, a Lifeline report, it was called, that an estimated for low and middle income, so not the poorest, but low and middle income countries, estimates 4.2 trillion over a lifetime of new housing and infrastructure as a net benefit. So that translates into $4 of net benefit for every dollar invested into climate resilience. So if I have this in mind, and I think about the long-term impact that resilience creates, rather than thinking of the initial capital cost invested, but actually the long-term impact, then we really can flip the script, I believe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I think that point on the investment in resilience. Well, I really liked your point on the default setting is informality. That's great. And also the point on investing in resilience is I don't think people realize or recognize or even want to recognize how critical informal settlements are to the running of a city. The people there, it's fundamental. These cities would not function unless those people are resilient. And so, this has to, we have to flip that. So that's fantastic. Thank you. Very good. So now, if I could pass over to you, Anjali, and then we'll give you a moment to compose yourself, Mohammed, and thank you for joining us. And if you could, Anjali, tell us a little bit about the work of WRI and the work you're doing and what you see as the key policy spaces.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nate. Thanks, everybody, for being here. My colleagues here have so eloquently laid out the important, policy issues that we need to be dealing with. I'll also say kudos to you, Maktavish, for that video. For anybody who's talking about mainstreaming and the sort of synergy between the climate and development agenda. Your video needs to be shown at the highest levels on screens throughout this COP. Because one of the big issues is, there's a climate agenda and financing coming to that agenda. There is a development agenda, and they are one and the same. I mean, that is what your video makes clear so well. I'm at World Resources Institute. We are a think tank and a do tank, as we like to say. We work on all of these climate and development issues. But one of the things I'm thrilled to just announce here is that with all the partners running this session and Mahila Housing Trust in India as well, what we've tried to do is really bring under one umbrella all of the initiatives that relate to this agenda of equitable housing and climate resilient housing and urban services for those living in urban slums, with Slum Dwellers International, with BRAC, with Habitat for Humanity, trying to really have one voice at a place like the COP, trying to really elevate that voice in some of the discussions around adaptation and climate finance. And so please I'll just invite you to go to rehouse.org. We launched it just before COP, and much of what I'm going to talk about here in terms of the policy actions, the local actions, will be the work program of Rehouse. So let's look that up. Please look that up. To your question, Nate, on policy changes, levers that we need to work on. One of the things you've already said, Rabani, this idea of embedding issues of housing and urban services at the national policy level. Our practitioners pointed that out as very much the need from the ground as well. There's national adaptation plans, you mentioned it, there's national NDCs. There's national urbanization policies being developed as we speak for major countries like India. India is developing, for anybody who knows Indian cities, I mean, for the first time ever, it's national urbanization policy. It has, countries have national urban infrastructure finance programs. But this issue of housing and urban services being so critical to the resilience of billions of people, to the extent of 2 out of 3 people living in low-income countries around the world today, urban residents. This doesn't surface in these plans. How do you start to embed this into all of these climate and urban infrastructure policies? I'll also say all of the sectors we're talking about, housing, that's buildings. Where the housing comes up, that relates to the transportation. The water, the sanitation in the housing. These are all sectors important for climate adaptation or climate mitigation. So this agenda of housing and urban services gives you the opportunity to tackle mitigation, adaptation together, in addition to livelihoods and so on. You were just making the point, Nate, about how important informal settlements are in terms of, just the people who live and work out of informal settlements. We have amazing data, like look at a city like Mumbai and the slum of Dharavi, which is considered one of the biggest in Asia. It has an annual turnover. It contributes to the economy of the city about $1 billion on an annual basis, just through all the leather work and the cottage industries and all of that, right? So we just don't quantify all of this enough to be able to bring it to these discussions. So the first point is about embedding this agenda in the national policies and programs. The second point I want to make is integrating across agendas as well, breaking the silos, finding the synergies. So I'll give you one example. I speak a lot about India because I spent a lot of time there, I grew up there. India is another one of those, first countries to have a national cooling action plan. As you know, heat waves are getting worse and worse, recurring every year. There's a national cooling action plan. There's a housing ministry working on a housing for all program. However, if you ask the national government, how do you operationalize your cooling action plan at the subnational and city level, it's a black box. We don't know how we're going to do that. Can we not integrate that with our affordable housing program? Can we not start to have mechanisms to have cities participate in that process and integrate these agendas? So we need much more of breaking the silos and finding the synergies. Can we not have, as you were making the good point, housing budgets that are dispersed based on criteria that incorporate climate resilience and so on, right? The last point I want to make is very much on the financing. You know, we had Development and Climate Day yesterday. Some of you were at that event. Just an amazing statistic that was shared, so it stuck in my mind, so I should bring it up here, that 10% of climate finance goes to adaptation. 10% of that goes to communities that are the most vulnerable. 6% of that is actually used for investment that involves the participation of the communities. So, so we're talking about 0.06% of climate finance being delivered in the way it needs to be delivered for an agenda like this to be actualized, where you need community participation, you need adaptation finance going to where the needs are the greatest. So just think about that, when we are in these COP conversations and there's billions being announced for, loss and damage finance and climate finance, how do we create the criteria and the processes for that financing to reach where the needs are the greatest? And what do you need for that? And one of the most basic things you need for that is data of the kind, the stories from the ground that our practitioners were sharing earlier about how communities are coping day in and day out with recurring disasters. What is the expense to the household? What is the long-term cost to their livelihoods, their health, and so on? We need more of that data to start to feed into these more top-level policy discussions. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anjali. And I think one of the, WRI has many strengths, but one of its particular strengths is it also be able to bring that data from many partners together and communicate it and help it get into different areas. And I also take your point on the 10% of that 6% is key. So we have over 100 organizations now signed up to locally led adaptation principles, but and some of them have huge budgets, but we still very, very a little amount of money flowing. So despite the signatories on those, so I think it's this time we have to call those out more and more. If you've signed up to the principles, then you need to be really walking the talk. Fantastic. And Mayor Sefiani, so glad that you could join us. Thank you very much. And we're really excited to hear what you're seeing from this COP in terms of the policy opportunities, the policy challenges needed at the local level, especially within your city, and also the conversations you're having with other mayors really here to help move this forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to this very important event. I'm sorry for being late. I was speaking in another session, so sorry. I am Mohamed Sfiani, mayor of Chefchaouen, and Chefchaouen is one intermediary city in the north of Morocco. My city is painted in blue, houses and streets in blue, and we are committed to green and to sustainability. Is why since 2009, with the new elected people, we worked together with a participatory approach to have a sustainable city in the north of Morocco. And many things were done there. And we had a climate commitment, we have a sustainability commitment at a local level, and we planned many plans, vision. We have Chefchaouen Vision 2030 for the implementation of the global agenda, and plans every 6 years. We have an action plan, and we have a climate action plan. So we implemented many projects. In our city, as water, for example, drinking water, securing the city in drinking water, wastewater, and generalizing in all the city. We are now at 90%, but we have a station of treatment, high level of treatment of sanitation, and we have many projects on sustainable energy. The 50% of our
municipal buildings are equipped with solar panels, and the public lighting, now we are 25% in LED, and the next weeks we will be in 100% with one project financed by the UN Capital Development Fund and the national government. I think, in responding to your question, it's very important that cities can be here in the COPs. Because, as you said, in my country, for example, 64% are living in cities, more than, and 75% in 2050. So is migration from rural area to urban area, and that makes us pressure and challenges in our cities. And we know that we can't implement the climate agenda, and we can't implement the SDG agenda without cities. For us, we believe in that, because the cities are the closest institution to the citizens. But we need more help, more support. And as said my colleague, very small percentage goes to cities of finance. I know that less than 20% of less than 10% goes to local. And the majority to mitigation. All Africa, 4% of emissions. My country, Morocco, 0.2% for energy. But we believe in solidarity because no borders in climate. It's why we have projects in mitigation. We don't say no, only we must work in adaptation because no emission from my country of my city. But we have solidarity of all the world. But it's not normal that we don't receive sufficient technical assistance and sufficient finance, direct finance to cities. And I'm not the only mayor who says that. I am talking on behalf of the majority of mayors of the world, especially in the global south, especially for intermediate cities that are attractive to like the mega cities. And intermediate cities, the majority of cities in the world are intermediate cities. And we are more than 30,000 intermediate cities in the world. And the growth of population living in intermediate cities and more plus rapide, more speedy, more speed, sorry for my English, so speedy, in areas. So I think it's time. Yes, it's time to do concretely something for cities. Because we need implementation. I talked in the beginning of my speech on the political commitment, we have the ambition that we have, the plans that we have, but we have a gap, big gap, between what we want to implement and the resources we have, human resources and technical and financial resources that we have to implement our action plans. Last year's third initiative, very interesting, the start, the first ministerial meeting. And I know that because I am involved in many networks, as ICLE, GCOM, UCLG, and since 2014, LGMEA asked that. I think that the executive director of UN Habitat is former mayor. So he has the heart of cities. I know her when, and together we said, listen to cities when she was mayor. And we are proud of her and his teams. Now, I think third initiative continue because on 6th they have ministerial meetings. Champ initiative, very interesting to construct together with cities this global initiative launched in the local action climate summit, on 1 and 2 December. And this is opportunity for cities, but we must be in the heart of this global initiative. Loss and damage. We don't know how will be the positioning and the situation of cities in that. We don't want to repeat what's done on other funds since 2015. And the result is this percentage very low. So I think is opportunity to have a seat in the governance of these funds because if not, cities they will not believe like are believing now. They not have commitment that have now. Now we have commitment. We have hope. We have big, I think, if with concrete initiative to implement projects on the ground is for me the priority. When I am here, for example, in participating in the COP, or last year in Sharm Sheikh, or the people who elected me, who voted for me, asked me, dear Mayor, this is something for us in my neighborhood, this is something for my city, or only conference. I said yes, but no immediately. Because it's a process. And the process, no, it's easy to have results immediately. But we have another solution too. Level action, governance, level national governments. But we are having advocacy and pressure on national governments, on international institutions to have concrete projects in our city. For me, fortunately, we have benefits to some projects, and this is why I am happy. Some direct finance to some projects, but not sufficient. And now with my colleagues, my friends, mayors in Morocco, in North Africa, in other countries, never benefit of finance or technical assistance in the climate ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was great, and yeah, a good reminder on the mitigation. It's such a small part of many of the countries in Africa, but the resilience and adaptation is so critical, and why we need more there. And also, just as someone who's been in this space for a while, the leadership that we're seeing from mayors globally in the climate space is nothing short of inspiring. So thank you for being a key part of that. Wonderful. I'd like to now come out to our audience a bit. I have a big clock in front of me that's ticking away constantly, and I want to make sure we have time for our closing remarks, but I also know we have so much breadth of experience and insight within the room. So just like to see if there are some questions. Great, we've got one over here. And please also please also bring in the other panelists as well, so we can help get a microphone to them too. And if you could please introduce yourself as well. This lady here, yes, I think she had her hands up first.
Okay. Yeah, good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for all the speakers, for your intervention. My name is Nadia Haddad. I'm a member of the Executive Committee of the European Disability Forum. We are also a member of the International Disability Alliance. So persons with disability represent 50% of the world population. Can you imagine the video that we saw? If we added a blind and a deaf person in it, those people are completely forgotten in all those agendas. So I have two questions for all the panelists. I wanted to know about what do you do to involve meaningfully persons with disability and their representative organizations? And secondly, when you speak about housing, how can we ensure that when we build back better, that those houses are accessible, affordable, available, and especially also, therefore, all those most vulnerables of the most vulnerables who are not here. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'd like to take a couple questions just in the interest of time, so if we could, please.
Hi, good morning. Afternoon. My name is Na. I'm Ailesa Kwenometal. I work at RAIL as a climate and green buildings lead. Fantastic discussions, great statistics. I think my question was to the earlier panel. So just really curious, because obviously when we are dealing with the informal sector, in addition to housing, there are other pressing issues that I call bread and butter issues, where putting food on the table. How do we work in the importance and the complementary benefits of climate resilience and adaptation in a way that doesn't seem like we are dictating to them simply because they're poor? Because at the end of the day, people are just looking for a place to lay their heads. So how do we go, that extra layer? And I love your point about inclusivity. How do we think about doing that on a larger scale? But more importantly, do you have any ideas of how we can weave that into a mechanism that is attractive for finance people? Because that's also what I'm interested in. How do we translate that information to make that an area that is attractive to financiers? Because they keep, they're very risk averse to these areas. There's no direct ROI. They don't see any real benefit. So how do we translate that to make that area more attractive for financing? Because it's super crucial. Thank you.
Fantastic. Those are great questions. Maybe this will be the last one. Thank you.
It's more an information than a question. There's lots of talks. I just wanted to complete by the fact that there has been a resolution in UN Habitat General Assembly in June regarding housing. I think it's particularly important to think that it's important to think about slums, but I think there's kind of a, I don't know how to call that in English. There's to me, insufficient reflections on the... sorry, I'm Yves-Laurent Sapoval from the French Ministry of Ecological Transition. I just forgot to introduce myself. So we defended this resolution with Kenya, obviously, because we think that there is a lack of thought about how can we finance alternative housing than slums. The question is, if there is so much slums and we have this kind of financing at the global level that only aims full property owning of the soil, the land and the buildings, how can we think of different, how can we think differently in order to propose different solutions, alternative solutions that would not keep us into this alternative that obviously doesn't work since years. I mean, we've been... so this is one of the things we think should be addressed. Second thing is, well, there's lots of things to say, of course, regarding surge initiatives, regarding the CHOMP initiative we're having here, just to say that we took the lead as France on the construction and housing segment of surge initiative, and we are really trying to do something out of it. It's not easy though, because the local authority is not yet. Sorry. Okay, so I finished just saying that we launched the buildings breakthrough 2 days ago for info. And second thing, we're going to have a forum, a global forum on buildings and climate, and we will be addressing this question of housing, sustainable housing, in a way of just normally trying to tackle this question of just transition. That's all. It's a few elements, because it's. I heard you saying that this was not addressed at all in the discussions. We try really hardly to address it. So I just wanted to give this piece of information. Maybe it's not. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's growing.
Yeah, thank you. And I certainly didn't mean to say at all, just not enough. Yeah, fantastic. So I'll ask our panelists. Now the clock has turned orange, which it's, and I know the next color is likely red, and then it might shout at us. So if we could just be quite succinct in our replies, and we've got those questions around, not dictating, about involving people with disabilities, and then also thinking of alternatives. So Gollum, if I could pass to you first, please.
Thank you so much. Let me address the first question. First of all, BRAC has, different specific policy to address this environment and social safeguards, and also the gender policy address the, related issues. But two other points that I would like to, elaborate to respond to your question. In most of the projects design, particularly under the climate-based fund mechanism, when each of the project implementing partners, design their projects and develop their beneficiary profile, they ensure that whether disabled persons are living in that community or not. So identify those communities at first and make sure that they are getting benefits from the projects supported by Climate Bridge Fund and other programs of BRAC. My second point is the infrastructure that are built with the support from the CBF projects and BRAC programs must make sure that these are built in a way so that the persons with disability can use this infrastructure: water supply, sanitation, latrines, drainage systems, schools, all infrastructure that we build. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I would love to respond to Yves-Laurent's questions or the contribution to that. It's definitely true. There is a lot of things that have happened at COP, and I think what is very important is that it's coordinated, and that then the global sum is actually what makes the different impact. And indeed, at the second session of UN Habitat's Assembly, we have launched a declaration on affordable housing for all. And that declaration, for the first time since 1948, has put human rights, or the right to affordable housing, back into the agenda, and since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it provides, or the ambition for it is to provide a platform that consolidate, compiles housing data so that we actually make evidence-based decision making. And it goes hand in hand actually with another resolution that is on enhancing urbanization, the linkage between urbanization and climate change. And why are these different resolutions so important, but I didn't bring them up in my intervention before, is because the audience here is focused and is interested to hear how do we bring that resilience to the informal sector, and how do we bring that resilience to the housing sector. And so all these different resolutions sometimes can distort a little bit, or can make it so intransparent what all has happened and what all are like really necessary, but sometimes felt incremental steps. But they are so important to get your political buying right, to get national buying right, and get like movements forward, such as the SURGE initiative that was mentioned before, standing for Sustainable Urban Resilience for the Next Generation. It's an initiative that builds together 180 stakeholders, and all of them want to find different solutions for the housing building, for urban waste, urban mobility, urban electricity, and I'm forgetting one sector. So it is really the power of networks that comes together to bring the voices into it and find solutions that are evidence-based to that. But what we should not forget is that this voice of the informal sector needs to be in that as well. So the SURGE and CHAMPS and all of those networks need to be aware that these voices of the 1.1 and more billion informal, vulnerable people are in those agendas. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And we have to ensure we keep time for Ingrid from GIZ for closing remarks. So, but if Anjali, and if just anything very brief, if you could please. Thank you.
Sure. So maybe just quick comments on all. One, to your great point about looking at populations with disabilities. We've actually been working with C40 cities on designing resources for cities on inclusive climate action planning, so that systematically in all kinds of climate mitigation and adaptation actions at the city level, which include actions related to housing and land use and transportation, how they can incorporate considerations related to disabled populations and involve them in the decision, in the planning around them. Just one example, and those resources are online. I'd be happy to talk to you later. To the question about, which you asked for the other panel, but I just want to say that this analysis that you're talking about, where financiers need to be able to value the many co-benefits coming out of providing resilient housing to populations. You know, I talked about some of the livelihoods that are supported. There are health benefits. For the first time, we have a health day at COP. That is certainly not happening enough. I would actually point you to some of the great work Habitat for Humanity is doing in trying to value the benefit of investing in informal settlements. And it's a difficult task, but we need to do much, much more of that. And to the French gentleman, I mean, just to say, It's great to hear that you're taking that initiative from France. I would just say France needs to find many more partner countries to really start having a unified voice on this agenda, so that, that's the reason we're not seeing so much of it. It's one country here. We just need many more actors talking about this agenda. Thanks.
Wonderful. And thank you so much. And maybe you two can have a conversation more after. And Mayor, just again, if I could ask you to be brief. Thank you so much.
Okay, no, I think that's very important to have resilient housing and to implement in general our climate plan with multi-level action is very, very important, and we have some example for that. And I want to highlight one initiative, the GAF Fund. GAF Fund is very important, and shown my city benefits one project of GAF Fund for sanitation, and is the opportunity also to thank GIZ, because in shown we benefited the project for the creation then center, excellence center for energy and climate. So I think with that we can be ready to go to champ initiative, to go to surge initiative, and to tell them we are here, we are ready, we can support us for access to finance to have this resilient city, resilient housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have Carmen here. Oh, and I don't know if there's any, I know we're quite short on time, and I'm sure we can go a minute over or so, but maybe we can, is there any last reflections, or we can move, maybe let's move to Carmen from GIZ. Carmen, thank you so much for joining us, and sorry that I ate into a bit of your time. I'll cover the flashing clock so it doesn't distract you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful session, and wonderful means very important session, because the topic is really so urgent. And I like very much the contributions of all speakers, how honest and also reflected you shared with us the reality on the ground and what is needed most. So as we bring this session to an end, it is evident that the challenges surrounding adequate and affordable housing are huge and urgent. All the examples the speakers have shared, the numbers we have heard today, particularly those focused on the Global South and also the informal settlements, are a pressing need for action. I read recently in a report from UN Habitat, Serene, you were sharing some numbers here. 3 billion people globally will require access to adequate housing, demanding the construction of nearly 100 housing units daily. I think this is really a big number, and this poses a fiscal challenge, and that means significant pressure on municipalities, climate and environment. But it is also an opportunity, I would like to stress, also for economic progress and a just and climate-friendly transition, if we also consider the right materials, talking about affordable housing and rebuilt housing stock. So today we have heard that the problems are complex, but there are also technical solutions and innovative ideas out there. And Juan was mentioning the incremental self-built housing as a method of residential development in the Global South. And this also offers opportunity for individuals to adapt their homes as it needs to address. I think this is also very important to reduce vulnerability and also social hazards. But city governments and municipalities have to offer support and provide the necessary framework, this we have also heard today, to inhabitants and the framework conditions. Otherwise, they might end up with a home without water, lights, and sewage. I would like to share with you very, very briefly some examples from Germany, also to bring in other perspectives into the discussion. In Egypt, for example, Germany is working to improve the living conditions of the urban poor in 9 informal areas of Cairo. In India, Germany is combining approaches of digitalization with those of sustainable urban development and implement pro-poor housing in selected smart cities. In Rwanda, Germany is supporting an urban lab process to design solutions with relevant stakeholders to accelerate provision of sustainable and affordable housing for low-income urban households. But of course, more needs to be done and needs to be done in partnership. And in this regard, I would briefly mention the Compact with Africa, initiated under the German G20 presidency. I think this is a great example for partnership and stands for a crucial vehicle for attracting much needed investments in infrastructure on the African continent. Of course, there's also a huge need on on the other continents, but it is absolutely necessary that these investments flows into the housing and construction sector and successful approaches are replicated with other partner countries. Moreover, and I will come to an end very soon, we must look locally for successful initiatives that can be scaled. For example, the South African Housing and Infrastructure Fund is a means of tackling the challenge of affordable housing in South Africa. And now, as far as I know, a continental fund will be established as the African Housing and Infrastructure Fund to be a continental vehicle for tackling these challenges and so on. So looking ahead, this panel has delivered into diverse perspectives, including those of local governments, communities, representatives of human settlements, multilaterals, housing practitioners. So the commitment and insights shared by all esteemed speakers, I don't repeat all the organizations here, addresses the multifaceted challenge of the topic. As we move forward, let's not only recognize the hurdles, but also the potential within our grasps. So my closing remarks today mark not just an end to this panel, but a call to action. The path forward involves aligning with the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda. This was not mentioned before. Ensuring better low-carbon housing design, construction, access to finance for 1 billion people by fostering policy, practice, and also financial solutions. So let us carry this momentum beyond today's discussion and work collectively towards a future where decent, safe, and resilient homes are built with sustainable infrastructure. Thank you again.